Well, welcome to Remainders. This is I guess it's kind of like a double feature because we just got done talking about our Halloween films in the franchise and ranked them all. So if you haven't heard that episode, you can go back. It's the previous episode, number 25 in the Remainders series. And this is 26. And we're going to be talking about the film Haxan, which is a silent film from 1922. And Pat, let me just start by saying, hey, happy Halloween, man.
Happy Halloween, bud. This is my favorite month of the year because of Halloween. Everything is my perfect temperature, the fall, the autumnal setting, and all the horror movies. And so that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on this month. So.
I don't know. Do you find it kind of like almost like going to like a restaurant and there's like when there's too much on the menu, it's like almost like your head kind of explodes during this holiday because there's so much you want to watch, and every night there's like just too much on the menu. It's like too many horror movies, like for instance the Criterion like stuff that they rolled out. It's like they got vampires, they got 80s horror, they got Universal monsters. In my head, every night is like, where do I go? Is it going to be this black and white Dracula again, which I've seen for like the 2000th time, or am I going to watch Catherine Bigelow Vampire Take and enjoy that tonight? It's so hard.
And I know you did watch that one recently.
I did.
So that's
Near
pretty
Dark.
exciting.
Yes.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Catherine Bigelow, who we mentioned quite a bit previously, talking about Point Break. Yeah, Near Dark's always a go-to classic. That one's getting.
I mean, Paxton too.
That's what I'm saying. Like
anytime you got Bill Paxton.
She collects the Cameron crew quite a bit in that movie, and it's so good. I never feel overwhelmed because even though I'm watching more horror movies in October, I'm watching horror movies the other 11 months of the year. So I definitely have time and the focus to do that because
I think it's more on me because like I just want like Halloween to never end. So it's like the month of October. As soon as it turns October 1st, I'm like, okay, like let me fit all the Halloween shit in I can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm loving your paintings right now. It looks like that was a piece from one of your Halloween art classes. Is that right?
Yeah.
That one's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I've been trying to paint more in the month of October as well. A little bit more scary, spooky. Never mind the mixture of Beatles.
Yeah, but the skull right next to it adds it. Yeah, there you go. The skull with the Beatles.
We could probably just say this one's not as Halloween, but everything else is in my background. And yeah, I just love this time of year so much that every bit of my art being gets like thrown into it. So yeah, that was the art class that I did. I set up like a cool Halloween still life, and everybody got to paint from that, and that was like a way of keeping it original but also like getting you in the spirit. And those kind of things are cool, especially like there's a place in Burbank that I just found out about, and I'm sure everybody in LA knows about it, but it's called Halloween Town. So my girlfriend and I went, and all year round it's like a street in Burbank that has Halloween themed stores. And so it doesn't just happen and exist for Halloween, it happens all year round. And I got a lot of those props at that Halloween store. The coolest thing, cool things to do here in LA. There's always something spooky, exciting. I went to Universal Horror Nights and did the Halloween. Speaking of Halloween, the episode we just did, I waited in line for 3 hours for Michael Myers to scare me for 15 minutes through the exhibit. And then they had a Killer Clowns from Outer Space exhibit or haunted house, which was awesome. Really cool, really long day though. So I'm really doing it up, man. How about you? What have you been doing to get yourself in the Halloween mood?
Oh my goodness. Well, so we were texting earlier today, getting ready to record. And so I'm basically coming home right now from 14 hours at the Music Box. I slept at the Music Box last night for their 24 hours of horror marathon. The Music Box.
How does that happen? Do you like sleep in the seat? Like what the hell?
That's what I did. I was going to aim for all 24 hours. Didn't happen. I ended up going there at 10 o'clock, and I've been at the Music Box since 10 o'clock last night. We started recording today at 1. So I am feeling great, but excuse me for any hot takes that I may have because I'm on almost no sleep. So, but yeah, I mean, so if you're in Chicago, the Music Box is obviously, we've mentioned it multiple times here, definitely one of the best theaters. certainly in Chicago, and I think the nation. And they have the Music Box of Horrors every single year before Halloween. 24 hours of old horror, new horror, obscure, some famous. It's just a perfect programming of horror coming from all different directions. And yeah, I have such a great time. I got there at 10 last night. I was going to try to do it earlier, but ended up getting a little bit of work done, and then showing up at 10, kind of hung out with the vendors a little bit, a lot of cool local vendors, bric-a-brac and whatnot in Chicago, selling their stuff, rare DVDs and all the cool horror stuff that we love. And then watched Blade, and I was off. I ended up falling asleep at like 3:00 in the morning for about 2 hours. I missed Idle Hands, which started at 3:00, which was, I was excited to watch, but kind of fell asleep for it. Just in my seat, you know, pretty cozy in there. All these people getting excited for movies at 2, 3 in the morning is a rarity, even for Chicago. So woke up, watched The Oracle from 1985, and then Flesh Eater, which was a heavily Romero-inspired zombie movie. And then their capper, which we've offhandedly talked about recently, was Ernest Scared Stupid, which is that's what's kind of unique about the Music Box of Horrors, that you can have high art and low art, and it just blends so perfectly together like peanut butter and jelly. There's nothing unusual about the fact that they're ending the marathon with Ernest Scared Stupid, which, by the way, had some of the best effects by the Chiodo brothers, as you just mentioned. They did the effects for Ernest Scared Stupid, the directors of Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Killer Clowns from Outer Space, yeah.
Yeah, and they basically outdid themselves with those creature effects, playing off of Ernest. So, I mean, that was a childhood favorite, I think, for a lot of people, and an introduction to horror for a lot of kids in the early 90s too. So I think that's a big reason why they wanted to end it. And they wanted to end it with something a little bit lighter, you know, not something dreary like zombies eating everybody. So they ended with something like that. So I was texting you while we were that was finishing up. So walked out, enjoyed a brief walk, and then we just finished up our recording of Halloween ranking, as you mentioned, and so you can check that out on a different episode. And then I'm still excited to keep on talking about Haxan.
Yeah, totally. And thank you for doing this. We've been trying to mix around like our schedules, and looks like today you're the one who's actually the busiest, and so I appreciate you making the time. I had no clue that you were sleeping there last night. I mean, I knew you were doing it, but I just didn't know like how involved you were going to be in it, you know?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's like I didn't plan on falling asleep. It just happened to be like that at 3 in the morning. If it was up to me,
during the Devon Sawa Idle Hands, right?
I would have happily stayed up and watched Devon Sawa and Seth Green in that great movie from '99, but just happened to miss that. But yeah, it's I'm on a roll, so it's like I'm happier doing this now because I'm like so pumped with
I was going to say, you kind of feel
so.
like more focused than you ever have. I almost feel like you should do 24-hour marathons every time we do roll into a next Remainders episode, you know?
24-hour marathon, chug some iced coffee, and you're good to go with a horror appreciation month on Remainders. So
yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, let's get into Haxan then, you know, like so this is my pick, and I kind of
Darren pick.
The reason that we're talking about this film today is because of silent films. We haven't covered a silent film yet on Remainders, and I think this month is perfect to talk about a silent film. And the reason I wanted to talk about this one specifically is because it has a lot to do with witchcraft and you know, devils and demons and things like that. And like, it's not about how heady it could get about, you know, I think this explores a little bit more about like the reasonings of why people thought people were witches, and you know, debunking some of that. Even for 1922, it's pretty amazing that they were like going there. And it's not really the reason that I chose this film. It's more so because it's so fucking scary to see a silent film like this, in my opinion. To revisit it in 2022, to see a film from 1922. So we're talking 100 years. We're talking about seeing this film during Halloween, where you have to see the expressions to understand the content, and it's terrifying. There's a score which has been redone, because I believe that they had to um, the film itself, I believe, had to be updated a few times. It's on the Criterion channel right now, and that's where we watched it. So in 2016, they released the film as a 2K restoration, but over time they've kind of recut this film, and wasn't in 1922 wasn't necessarily like the easiest thing for audiences to watch something about witchcraft, because it's directed by a man named Benjamin Christensen, and he also portrays the devil. So if anybody's seen this film, that is like one of the scariest parts of this entire film is the devil. Like, he's got his tongue wagging. It's insane, and it scares the shit out of me.
There's some amazing tongue work from this director as the devil.
Yeah, sorry, my phone was just going off. As soon as I said the devil, I was like, "Oh shit!" Like, what does this mean?
That's modern technology for you. That's the devil.
Yeah, right. Like basically in 1922, if they saw a cell phone, they would think that was the devil, right? So, but yeah, he's like wagging his tongue, and he just pops up, and it's like, again, if you don't know anything about the film and you just see these images, they're terrifying. The film itself explores witchcraft through history, right? So highlighting the superstitions about it, the folklore, misunderstandings, hysteria, medical findings, torture, and more, including some like Frankenstein-like grave robbing adventures in one of the vignettes there. And yeah, I brought my version of Frankenstein, which I read every year.
Hell yeah.
And then also I'm reading right now, as I talked about, Dracula. So as we go through and talk about these things, it's kind of like all intertwined, right? Like grave robbing and different things like that. They get like reintroduced through movies through time, and Haxan kind of has all of it. It has like a witch's brew, let's say, of all of the kind of elements that make scary movies that we love today. So when you ask like why this movie for me, it really has to do with like, it has a lot to offer. It's historical, but it's also like creepy in the fact that it's from 1922, 100 years ago, and it's silent. You had never seen this film before.
This was the first time watching it. Yeah, this was always on my radar. I knew it existed, but yeah, I had never sat down to watch it. And I'd seen images of it before, but yeah, this was definitely a first time run through for it. And man, yeah, it's certainly as intense, if not more, as you're describing it right now.
Yeah, what are your did you like it? Like, what are your first initial thoughts when you saw it? Without knowing much about it.
I had such a great time watching it. I watched this on a Sunday morning, so instead of going to church, I watched Haxan.
Nice.
Not really disrupting my normal plans, but that's
yeah.
It was a shame because like when you suggested it, I was just Googling it, and there was like 2 separate screenings here in Chicago with like live scores at our theaters.
Oh, bummer. Yeah.
That I missed, and then the second one I couldn't. I already was booked that night, and so I wasn't able to attend it. But as I've mentioned before, it's just like living in Chicago. There's always so many great fucking opportunities to watch great movies at our theaters and whatnot.
This film is like a top one for that. Like here in LA, I talked to my friend. I was like, "Have you ever seen Haxan?" We're going to do a Remainders episode on it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I saw that like 2 years ago with a live music score." Yeah. So that's actually like pretty popular with a lot of these silent films.
No, it's awesome. I mean, that's probably why I've seen it like popular amongst the film crowd here in Chicago. Yeah, I had an amazing time watching this. It's such a great historical document. Obviously, you said it's 1922, legitimately 100 years old right now, which is kind of crazy to think about. That talk about a testament of a piece of art. Of like you create a film and people are still talking about it 100 years later. Not just talking about it, but showing it on a regular basis. That is the height of success, I think, for a filmmaker to wish for. But yeah, like it spoke to me a lot, largely in terms of its influence on film. I was thinking of like Robert Eggers and The Witch. I mean, I guarantee that Robert Eggers was like jerking off to this film in the best way. when he was doing The Witch, which is a movie I fucking love, because there are just so many direct influences and style choices and kind of just visual aesthetics that he definitely pulled from this movie, rightfully so. And yeah, it just captures what witchcraft was like in the Middle Ages, which is really just, you know, another form of like religious persecution for stuff that can't be explained immediately. So they just call it evil, the devil's work, and then they just burn you for it. And, you know, luckily that's not quite what we do anymore, but in different formats maybe. And so, yeah, I had an amazing time watching it. Thank you for suggesting this, because it's definitely one that's going to be sticking with me for a long time, I think. And it's obviously one that stuck with you for a long time.
Yeah, you know, like the reason that I first saw this film was I believe it was in maybe 2019. Criterion had released a German expressionism sort of series, and there was a ton of old silent films in there that you could watch, you know, around Halloween time. So it was really themed that way. And I believe Haxan was in there, and I had kind of gone down the rabbit hole of watching all of those films, and I just started to really be like, I had never really seen these films before. Visually, it was so new and exciting and scary, and I thought, like, in my opinion, I couldn't really be like scared anymore. Like, right, we got, like we just talked about, Michael Myers and slasher films and everything that's like so haunting to you around Halloween. You're like, I've seen it all. But like, when you go back 100 years, these films are actually completely terrifying. And you think about like yourself and some of these scenarios and these scenes that they show. I love the like the kind of like the way they gel silent films for moods, like with color. Like it's just like a straight blue that'll go over a certain vignette, or, you know, something sepia toned. And it's like what they had to work with at the time, but also the artistry of the sets and things like that. You know, they must have put so much time into building these things. And around the time I was watching that German expressionism thing, there was a popular play kind of in the arts district here in LA called Cages that was playing. And Cages has a lot to do and with the Cages had a lot to do with projectionism and kind of playing with that, which is what a lot of this is. So like there's scenes in here where you see the witches flying and they're projected, and it's like really, really great stuff that they do as far as visually in this film, and the way that the sets are built, which really brings you into this kind of weird world. It's what they had to work with at the time, but it's carried over 100 years later as making this movie even more creepy because of the way that they had to sort of utilize the technology at the time, which was really just building sets and kind of using projection, you know, to tell the story.
Hell yeah. No, that's like such a good point on the images of that, especially the witches flying, because yeah, that, as I was mentioning, as we were talking about Rob Zombie, it's like one of the hardest things you can do is to imprint an image on somebody as a filmmaker, and that sticks with them. It's like, and there's definitely the case with that, with a lot of images that were from this movie. And like you were saying, it's like, it is pretty fucking scary. Like it's creepy to watch this movie. One, for the obvious reasons, because it's part historical. These things actually like happened to all these women that were accused of witchcraft and then burned for their supposed devil work. But the other part is the aesthetics. It does have you know, it's not like horrific images. They're just like so disturbing. It's like you're just seeing things that like you don't, that makes you feel off by just kind of viewing them. And that's like I said, that's a very hard thing for a filmmaker to do. It was making me, I mean, as you mentioned that, it's making me think of like which movies actually are scary. I mean, we both love horror. We just talked about an entire franchise of Halloween. At no point where we mention any of them are actually kind of frightening or anything. We watch them for fun. But it's pretty rare for a movie to be actually scary. I mean, as a kid, like the only movie that ever actually kind of freaked me out as a kid was The Exorcist, which I think is a common answer for a lot of people because it's so fucking great. And it's so well done. And we see Pazuzu, the devil, at the beginning of this movie. That's the devil that they use in The Exorcist. We see an image of that character at the very beginning, and it brought me back to that. But yeah, the movie definitely has a pretty unique way of making you feel off while seeing some of these images. Some of it is the time, the fact that it is 100 years old, so it's just naturally, it's just going to look a little bit more freaky.
Right, 100%. Yeah, and you kind of like when you watch a Nosferatu, right? You're like, it's such an old silent film as well, but you're like, damn, this is like creepy because it's so old. Like, you know, it's hard to put yourself into a time period that even to fathom that people existed in that time. You know, it's like going through an old graveyard, and you see people like headstones from 1800s, and you think, holy shit, like that's a time period I don't even know anything about. Like, people were walking around during that time and they've been gone for so long. It just makes your mind go places. And again, just this being silent and that there's no dialogue and that there's this, creepy music score and stuff like that, it really adds to it. Because I like your question, like what really scares us, what movies really do scare us, right? Like we could talk about the Babadook, and I don't know if you've seen that film, but like it talks a lot about that movie is one of the basis of why I wrote the Scissors Eulogize record, because talking about horror and things that we like put into our world based on traumatic events and carrying around grief with you, like, is a way of telling a horror movie. And I thought that's why that movie was so great. There's different ways, again, what makes something truly scary. I guess it's all, of course, up to the audience and the individual. You could be really scared about a slasher movie, of course, and those are scary because like you don't ever want to know that kind of thing happening in your own life, of course. And it's one of those great mysteries that like we're like what are we afraid of, like what really truly scares us. So that question obviously is up to, it's in the eye of the beholder or the person watching. But at the same time, like movies like Haxan do it so well because of all of the things we just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, when you ask what actually scares us, I mean, my answer has always been the unknown. Just not knowing is humanity's biggest fear. And that kind of plays out in a lot of movies. Just technically, it's like not seeing the creature is oftentimes far more frightening than actually seeing it on screen. And maybe like it kind of relates to this. It's like the devil, because they believed in the devil, and so, but they didn't quite know what was going on, so their fear of the unknown was projected onto persecuting witches.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah, like we don't, like what we just talked about it, like the unknown, like why is Michael Myers killing? That's like the whole crux of everybody's like love of that franchise, is that they have no clue why. He's just pure evil, right? Like that's the thing.
The deadest of eyes.
Yeah, the deadest of eyes. Yeah,
I'm pretty tired, so actually my Loomis is probably pretty sound and accurate with the regular voice. So
yeah, very like laid back and very relaxed.
The blackest of eyes. Oh man, yeah, this movie is wild. So it's broken up into the 7 parts. I mean, it sounded like it was originally created more of a documentary, but then as they were making it, it kind of took on a little bit, not necessarily of narrative, but of like stage acting in the 7 parts. So
yeah, it's even interesting because like I feel like the director does break the fourth wall and tell the audience like, hey, we're using the same actor. Yeah. Interesting, right?
That's when we get to 7, if we're going in order, I want to talk about that because I thought that was so cool, him bringing that towards at the end. But yeah, I mean, lots of graphic torture in this. Orgies with the devil, as you mentioned, that's Benjamin Christensen playing it. What a perfect name, by the way, Christensen, for making this movie. Love it. His namesake. Häxan Films, I just found out, that's what that was the production company that made Blair Witch in '99. They named it themselves Häxan Films. So
because like Haxan means witch, right?
Yeah, so that's cool. But then like I said, I saw a lot of influence with The Witch by Robert Eggers, and that definitely tied up a lot of it for me. But yeah, did you want to talk about like each segment kind of through, or did you have like any standout components, images that you wanted to mention?
We can if you want. I think like you said it the best. I think it, you know, if you're thinking to the audience out there, if you're thinking about watching this film, I would just say go through it and watch it in the lens that you're trying to be entertained, more so than trying to like the historical value. I think you got to go
Yeah.
into it first, like be entertained by like the imagery and just like sort of the creepiness of the film in the first place. Because we could go into all that kind of stuff. Like they do break it up in 7 parts so that they can talk about different things. One of my favorite parts, to be honest with you, is just like the photography of the like the torture devices.
Oh.
It's just cool to see the way they filmed that,
Yeah.
which I thought was beautifully filmed. You know, again, like for 100 years ago, it was like really beautifully filmed. But there's also really, really creepy stuff where they're like cauldrons and, you know, devils and, like you said, orgies with the devil. It really goes through all of those like 7 parts to kind of tell you why, as a society, we persecuted witches, or, you know, have a misunderstanding about certain things, that is like almost like a forewarning tale. But I kind of just don't want to talk about it that way in this episode, because I'm more so bringing this to everyone's attention because it's creepy and it's interesting to view during Halloween. You know what I mean? I don't want to get too heavy
Yeah.
about it, I suppose.
No, yeah. I mean, again, this was made in 1922. And in 1922, they were like, whoa, this is crazy what they thought about witchcraft back then, right? Well, it's pretty
Yeah.
easy to look at it in 2022 and be like, well, that was their view of women still in 1922. It's not really as evolved as you would hope so.
Yeah,
But like,
not much has changed. Right,
right,
exactly.
right, right. Well, like at the end, they were just like, well, it's not witchcraft, it's just hysteria. Which would be like, yeah, it's just women being crazy for being women. That was like
Right.
their kind of rational discussion at the end. So that doesn't, that's kind of like another aspect of like, well, looking back, like this is what we actually thought in the past. But yeah, no, those images of the torture devices were pretty fucking rad. The spike collar, the toe cutter, and there was the hobble, which was just throwing me back to misery. I watched that a couple of months ago, which is a great
Yeah.
best hobbling scene ever. But just showing those devices here were so badass. But yeah, that was the part where, as we just kind of mentioned before, it does get a little meta. He puts like a card and it says, my actress wanted to try out thumb screw. She confessed. So I thought that was like so perfect. So it shows like an image of his actress like volunteering to do it, and then being like, oh yeah, I understand like why so many women were confessing, because they were basically getting tortured one way or the other. So
Yeah, it's kind of breaking the fourth wall in that. And that's why it's like such an interesting film in general too, to like the like filmmaking process, and how I don't know if I've necessarily seen a film since that's done it the same way, you know.
yeah, no, it's this is again 1922. This was like the beginning of film. Films were still silent, obviously. It was like a completely new medium. It's just crazy to think about. It's like how ubiquitous films in our lifetime and for a couple generations before us was, but like it's still a relatively new medium. That's what's kind of crazy about it. I mean, when you compare it to like music, literature, whatnot, film is a new medium, and that's why hopefully you get as much as many experimental filmmakers as you can. But it's like everything everybody was doing in the teens and the 20s was experimental because it had never been done before.
I mean, I just watched the newest Scream film, which as a franchise, I think that is like one of Wes Craven's.
I want to hear your take on it.
Have you seen the newest?
Oh, yeah. Saw it in theaters. Oh yeah, for sure.
So the first 3 Scream films to me are underrated. I still think that I think people love them, but I think that they should be like really highly regarded, especially the first one, of course. I think is an astoundingly great film in general. Wes Craven, hats off, rest in peace. And this newest Scream, I didn't mind for what it was. It's definitely felt like we need to put, we need to make the money on the franchise and we'll
Mm.
bring back the like players. It didn't, it was fine. It was a little bit throwaway, but I got to say, talking about the way that film has evolved, and here we are talking about this. A couple years ago, I heard that they were going to bring James Dean back to do another movie that they're putting together based on, a CGI character. And in
Mm.
the Star Wars universe, they do a lot of CGI work to bring back characters that are either long gone or they're doing age defying work on their face, like bringing great horror actor Peter Cushing back for
Oh,
a
right.
scene
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the film. But it kind of works in those films because you're kind of like, okay, we're trying to tell a story and we want people to understand that that character has a big part in it. It's not carrying the whole film, and I can get on board with that. Again, we're talking about the evolution of film and like what they're doing, so I'm seeing more and more of that. And the reason I bring up Scream is because they bring back Billy Loomis as a character who's sort of in the head of his daughter. And in my opinion, there was just like they just tried too hard. They're just trying to bring back too many like characters from the original, and you didn't need to
Mm.
bring him back. And it wasn't even very well done as far as like the CGI or whatever. I don't even know what that process is called, but I'm bringing it up, and I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
bringing it up because of this film. Like you said, it's kind of like this is where we're going in film, right? Like the Marvel universes and stuff. Everything is kind of put together more in computers, uh, which is interesting. Is that the way that we're going? I even heard a recent Tim Burton interview where he was like, "Yeah, I kind of like stepped away a little bit from film because people just like don't really have the people who are running the studios don't really understand how to do it the way that they used to do it, that they used to make films." And I
I
thought that
heard he
was an
said that.
interesting,
Yeah.
yeah,
I heard,
yeah.
and I'm so happy to, I mean, it's never too late, but he should have said that years ago. I think he was like saying like, yeah, finally when I did Dumbo, it was just like such a circus of a work environment that there's no point in even trying to make a film with those type of restrictions.
And even saying like, at the time of Batman, they were saying it was too dark, it was too dark, it was too dark.
Yeah,
And then he said like, now it's like you watch these Batman films and it's like they're basically like cotton candy.
yeah. Oh man, I really hope we get some more smaller features from Tim Burton. No, man.
That sounds like where he's headed, from the interview that I read, which would be great.
Yeah, I mean, we covered Ed Wood because it's one of the greatest movies of all time, and yeah, I would love. I mean, like I said, I've been lamenting the fact that he hasn't made smaller features for a while, and I would like to just get back to that. But yeah, Scream was Billy. What's the actor's name? I forget his name.
Skeet Ulrich.
Skeet Ulrich. He was actually acting in that, and then they de-aged him, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he was actually on set, and then they just used CGI to de-age him to look like he was in high school. Yeah, I thought that was cool. I mean, no, yeah, I mean, that's all I really had to say about it. I definitely like the new Scream. Yeah, that franchise is fucking is jam packed. It's pretty sustainable. There's definitely no movie in there that's like really bad. I think Scream 3 is probably the weakest in my opinion. Despite having Patrick Warburton in it, it still wasn't the best. And yeah, I was definitely a big fan of that new one. I like the story that it went back with Loomis, and I guess we should have said spoilers, but yeah, and his lineage. Speaking of the references, like his name was Billy Loomis, and then his daughter's name, Sam Loomis, which basically just brings it full circle.
No, sorry, Sam Carpenter.
Oh,
in 2022, yes, in 2022, Scream, his daughter's name is Sam Carpenter.
Really?
Samantha
Wait,
Carpenter.
oh man, I'm remembering it as her being named Sam Loomis. Okay.
No, because
yeah,
Billy Loomis is obviously her father in that universe.
Right.
And I know we're getting off Haxan a little bit, but yeah, just like that's what we talked about in the Halloween episode, like how it's cool that they, recycle these last names of great horror directors and great horror characters.
I mean, that's the best of both worlds. Then her name's Samantha Carpenter with her surname as Loomis. So she's got the best of both worlds. So
right,
no, it's
yeah.
Yeah, no, I was definitely very much pro on that new Scream. I I've been hearing, I mean, I love that it's like a true Nev Campbell story. Not
Yeah.
just that one, but just like from 1 through 5, that she's in and almost the main character in all of them, if not all of them.
Well, like Halloween, I mean, it also takes place in a certain location, like Woodsboro, So
yeah.
you're going back to Woodsboro, just like you're going back to Haddonfield every time you hear, you see these films.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that is a good component of it, that CGI de-aging, because that definitely breaks the doors open for a new type of filmmaking, whether or not that's good or bad. We obviously don't know.
Well,
But like,
again,
yeah,
as we're talking about witches and stuff, that's another type of witchcraft. I mean, we're able to de-age ourselves in film. We're able to actually make film. Like that could be looked at as a persecuting thing that you get burned alive for back in 1922 for sure. Like what the fuck is this? Like, but now it's pretty normal, and we just technology keeps on getting more. Like you could probably do that de-aging thing on your phone now. I don't even know, but
yeah, it's filters, filters on
Yeah.
Instagram. Every selfie I'm putting on Instagram every single day, it's always DH to make myself just look, my beard look a little more trimmed.
You can even do that on Zoom. Like, yeah, a little bit more fluffy.
Yeah, exactly.
You can even do that on Zoom. You can put like, touch up my appearance on this thing.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is.
I mean, I don't think there's really much else to say about Haxan, to be honest with you, unless you have more to say. I just really wanted to introduce it to people that haven't seen this film, to let them know it's awesome. It's really cool. Like, don't try to go into it too heady. Try to enjoy it for like what we talked about, the visuals and how it can really creep you out on a Saturday night, hanging with your girl, your guy, and kind of getting moody, having a glass of wine or something, and getting into the holiday spirit of Halloween. This movie will definitely put you in a cool vibe, and that's what it does for me anytime I see a silent film around. Anytime I see a silent film in general, but yeah, especially in Halloween time when you're talking about witches.
Hell yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I was definitely impressed with the way it kind of tied everything up at the end. I mean, it was pretty clear without being preachy, in terms of the devil is in all of us. It was basically what it was saying. It's like humanity has its own devils, and it just manifests in different ways, and then we look for things to label evil or the devil. I think they were showing like the doctor, the clergyman at the end. These are all just representations of evil and modern day devils. A politician strangling a woman, I think, was an image at the end, just showing that like people of power could potentially be the evil people in your life, and that's essentially what the devil represents. Even though,
ahead of its time in that way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a quote they put in like the 5th section. There was a little bit of like rehabilitation with a woman that was accused of being a witch in it. And there was a quote. It said, "The witch plague, like the Black Plague, ensued wherever the judges go." Essentially saying it's like these judges who were just disciples of the church. I mean, the evil was going wherever they went. So obviously it's just basically saying like it's the church manufacturing fright amongst people and then pointing to who's representing evil in its current state. And I thought that was just like, it was so perfectly put without being like preachy in any way. It's just like, I mean, humans create their own evil and then they need somebody to blame for it, which is just a default of humanity, which
totally.
Which we'll see if we can get over that, but that's just something that's been with us. And you see it like, obviously like we were mentioning, like it looks primitive in the Middle Ages to burn witches, but it's like, in 500 years, I'm sure a lot of the stuff that we're blaming people for right now is gonna be like, you guys were just looking for a scapegoat. So, because you didn't have one, because you didn't understand what you were afraid of.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to me that when we talk about this kind of stuff too, like you said, like a lot of forewarning tales in the artistry here. And being from 1922, like you said, it just like has a lot to offer and ahead of its time. So on second watch, you can go through and say, whoa, what should I take away from this film? And how I understand my world and what's going on in 2022, 100 years later, based on what I was hearing already just from 1922. What's changed? What have we worked on, and what have we gone backwards on?
Oof, you just blew my mind. Hopefully it won't go backward. Hopefully it won't go backwards too much. So
Yeah, I mean, that depends sometimes on the state of the world and the state of things. We'll have to see. Hopefully, I've got a long time left to talk movies with you, because this is like the nice respite, in my daily life, to be able to come and talk movies with you and have everybody chime in on what their favorite parts of these episodes are. So I would love to have some feedback from you guys out there if you liked Häxan, if you've seen it, or what is your favorite silent film to watch during the Halloween season? There's more out there, as I mentioned, and I'm always up for the conversation.
hell yeah. The true evil would be to not appreciate horror films. I think we can all agree on that. I was just looking at, so here's my music box of horrors, still pass just on here. It would be remiss not to show that still there. This was my my souvenir. I'm not going to drink it probably, but it's this growler from Corridor Brewing, showing some original artwork from
that's
the music box of horrors. I just figured I usually get like the poster that they do every year, and I'll probably still pick one up, but I figured this would be a pretty unique souvenir to keep on top of my fridge or something.
So that's real cool. I love the drawing on the front end, like that they use the greens and stuff like that. Yeah,
very cool.
Awesome.
And then also be a good time to talk next episode, unless we had any closing thoughts on Haxan.
Nope. Like I said, just want everyone to realize how great sometimes older movies can be during this Halloween season. And Häxan is a good place to start. 100 years ago, Benjamin Christensen, who's long gone, we should just say thanks to him for putting together such a cool, visual, striking film. And that's all I got to say about Häxan. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Love it. So maybe looking forward really quick. This was your pick, so it's my turn to offer some.
Okay.
We're going to keep horror month going on Remainders. We're going to keep it vintage. Mine is from 1955. And so this is a movie that was actually one of the opening films of the Music Box of Horrors just yesterday that I missed. Like I was saying, I was going to try to do the whole thing, but ended up getting busy with that. But I did hear it was completely packed house for this, which was good to know. But 1955, the movie The Night of the Hunter from Charles Laughton, starring Robert Mitchum. This is a terribly great film. It's definitely one of my favorite movies from the 50s. And the fact that it was playing at the Music Box of Horrors and we were just keeping a little old school, I figured this would be a perfect closing for the horror month on Remainders. Have you've seen this? I'm not sure.
I started to watch it, I think, just recently, like last month.
Really?
Because we had Robert Mitchum like Sweet on Criterion. Ooh, but never. I think it was one of those films where I was like, okay, tonight I'm gonna watch Night of the Hunter, and I got into it and then fell asleep or something like that. Not because it was a bad movie, just because I was tired. So I'm excited. Yeah. That's awesome. I've definitely heard of the film. I definitely know about it, and I love Robert Mitchum, of course. Some of my favorites of his later in Dead Man, Jim Jarmusch, of course, and then of course the original Cape Fear with Robert Mitchum. He's an incredibly big time badass as well. It's kind of like kind of like a pretty notable, no shits given personality. So I'm excited about it. That's great. I didn't even know that was your pick.
Yeah, that was I know it's listeners are getting real-time reactions from Darren right now, and they're loving it. It's definitely, I mean, we'll talk about it, but it's in my early 20s, I did plenty of older film viewing to catch myself up. I remember watching this back to back with 12 Angry Men, catching up on 50s cinema. And this one just always sticking with me. So I would highly recommend people checking that out beforehand, and we're going to get to watching that next week. Very excited to talk that with you.
Me too. And again, we said this on the last episode. We just did the ranking of all of the Halloween films. So go back and take a listen to that. Take a listen to all of the, I guess we're at 26 episodes now of Remainder. So there's a lot to listen to if you guys are interested of previous episodes. But in general, have a great Halloween, everyone. We'll see you back here with Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum. And yeah, Pat, talk to you next week.
Always a pleasure. Happy Halloween, everyone.